I'm Andy Pinches. I'm the Operations Director at Rosendale Valley Energy, and we are really happy to put on this webinar for you this afternoon. Delighted to have we're up to almost 180 people here. We had just shy of 300, well, just over 300 sign-ups from a diverse and extremely knowledgeable, experienced audience. From people from local authorities, community energy, government, NGOs, retrofit, energy sector, and beyond. So welcome, and I'm glad you've all managed to get on. So the purpose of today, we're looking to provide a progress report on the Net Zero Terrace Street project. The Climate Connect says the best way to find out if it will work is to do it. So a bit of housekeeping before we start going. We'll move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the webinar has been recorded, and we will share the recording with you along with the slides after we've finished. Please, can you only ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen shown there, and don't put your questions in chat because they will end up getting lost in there. If there are any questions in there that you like the look of or have similar to ones that you want to ask, please upvote them. That will help us get to the top so that we can potentially answer in a question session towards the end. We will aim to answer some of the questions that you've submitted already. Thank you for sending those in. Some of those will be addressed during our presentation, and any that we've not managed to squeeze in or answer today, we will send out an FAQ alongside everything that we send out to you. Yeah, just double check that your questions so we're not putting the same ones in there repeatedly. Slide. Thank you. So what are we looking at? So today we're running through Net Zero Terrace Street in a nutshell. What is it, and what we're looking to do, as well as a catch up on the progress of what we're doing on things like the range of work streams we're going through, the techno-economic and financial models, the service model, our demonstrator project, as well as the role of the council, Rosendale Borough Council, within the wider project. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A, and we'll wrap up with some next steps and how you can keep in touch and get involved. You can sign up for the newsletter using the link in the chat, and just again, we can't necessarily monitor the chat as we go through, but if you want to share points and interesting some pieces that you might have experience with, put them in and we'll save it and have a look at them and share them. So thank you. I will now pass over to Louise, who's Rosendale Valley Energy Strategic Director, to run through Net Zero Terrace Streets in a nutshell.
Thanks, Andy, and nice to see everybody. And as we said, so sorry about the lumpy start. So coming on to something much harder to deliver, let's have a look at how we decarbonise terrace streets. So the exam question that was posed a couple of years ago was, how do you decarbonise terrace streets, provide healthy, warm homes and affordable low carbon heat? We've got 17% of our national emissions that come from domestic heating, so it's an urgent thing we have to tackle. In the UK, we've got about 6 million smaller terraced homes. A lot of those are up north, more deprived areas. So that makes up about 30% of homes here in Lancashire, 14,000 homes alone in Rossendale. In our region, we've got about 20% rented, but that figure rises to 40% in terraced houses. So that's private rented in terraces. And a quarter of our renters are in fuel poverty. So we've got here older, colder, damp homes, hard to treat. As you can see from the picture, a lot of them solid stone, no space, particularly in back-to-back homes or homes with a little alley out the back and a yard, very little space for air source heat pumps. And as I said, we've got mixed tenure, so we've got shops and commercial premises as well as owner-occupiers, renters and social housing. So these people are at risk of being left behind. And currently, the approach that we're taking nationally isn't really working for these streets. So if your area has a local energy plan, a local area energy plan, you're getting a kind of mix of just district heating or just air source heat pumps, tends to leave out the terraces. The proposed heat zoning doesn't include our homes, so it's going for the big heat loads. The default we're going to get in these terraces as we decarbonise is electric boilers. So they are very expensive for people to run. So as a landlord, we are already seeing electric boilers going in and people's bills rising. It also puts a strain on the electricity grid. So that current fragmented approach isn't working, and our energy advisors are dealing with more and more people worried about paying their bills and staying warm over winter. So how do we solve this? The solution we've come to is to combine various already proven methods. So very good community engagement, physical infrastructure, and virtual infrastructure. So thinking about engagement, we're looking at how to get clusters of people in clusters of streets signed up through street-by-street engagement backed by the Feral Warmth app and platform. So that could be either a digital journey or a fully supported journey for people supported by our energy champions. As we go through that, we get better and better data put into the model. So we move on from kind of rubbish in, rubbish out EPC data through to much more granular, high quality information coming through onto the platform. So the modeling shows if we get a third of people signed up in a street, we can go ahead with the scheme. And then we're planning the managed journey from initial contact through to providing a long-term operational service for them. The physical installation we're looking at is in-street boreholes with shared ambient ground source loops. A small inside the home, a small ground source heat pump in place of the boiler, smart hot water tank and new radiators if they're needed. And then we're looking at sufficient retrofit or optimum retrofit to improve the fabric, plus picking up any repairs, leaky gutters, pointing and so on. Because as we know from Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, if you're getting a house that's in bad condition, you can't really retrofit it, so that has to be scooped up. So the point of the retrofit is to ensure the house can be heated by that smaller 6 kilowatt heat pump, retaining that heat. We'll come on to telling you about the demonstrator homes shortly. So we're making it cozy enough with that size heat pump. And then we will install solar PV on the roofs where possible. The virtual part of the infrastructure is joining all of this up together with a local smart energy system or energy club. And that tackles that spark gap. Gas is much cheaper than electricity. So despite the efficiencies of the heat pump, we still got to squash down that price of electricity for our customers. The way the program will work is it would be delivered in a phased and coordinated approach. So you can plan, get economies of scale, build up that local readiness or expectation, and critically build up the local supply chain. That way you've got accountability and people can invest in skills and know that there's a rolling program of work, not boom and bust as we get with kind of quickly announced, quickly delivered government funded schemes. The investment's raised and repaid long-term through a standing charge fee. So that means we don't have an upfront cost to the homeowner. We'll come on to that. So thinking about the key principles, we're looking at affordability as absolutely critical. Ideally, no upfront cost for residents and an affordable standing charge and affordable electricity bill. We're here for the long term. It's not fit and forget and go. It's fit and stay and support. There's strong community engagement at the heart of this. Too many people are missing out on existing schemes now. And we will enable demand-side response, so giving people an easy way to flex their demand, avoiding high peak prices, and play in this space, which richer people can play in at the moment because they've got PV or an electric vehicle, or they're happy with an app. So this will automate it within people's parameters. So if I want hot water for the kids' bath at a particular time, I'll get that. But if I'm out all day, that I might be able to say, just flex me, I want to get the cheaper charges. So we'll be designing a system where the home energy management system means people don't have to fiddle around with controls, but they say what they need and when, and there'll be ways to change that. And critically too, we'll use community and local energy where possible, that rooftop generation or generation coming in from other community energy schemes. So the market is just not reaching these people at the moment. We're looking to get it grant-free investable in the long term. I'll cover that later, because we can't get on paying for all this through the taxpayer. We're not reaching enough people. But the market isn't looking at these areas at the minute. They're looking at new homes, and they're looking at people who can sign up now and play in that space. So we think it's more likely to be operated by local co-ops, community benefit, or municipal schemes. But if Eon, Octopus, OVO, whoever want to come and talk to us, be a patient long-term operator happy to forego super profits or super sell-on, then hello, give me a ring. We're working on developing a standardized, replicable and scalable service so that we've got the pipeline of projects coming through the country, and that we've got finance and investment coming through so we can aggregate, and we'll have the same due diligence, similar processes, so it becomes reliable rather than a lot of different pilots and projects around the place. So that's going to be wrapped up in a methodology that's operated by a community interest company. And it could also, we're looking at how it would nest in other schemes. So how might it land in Greater Manchester or Bristol, for example? What's new or different or troubling for some people is, yes, it's really hard. We know that. If it wasn't hard, we wouldn't be doing this. There'd be a market for it already. We aren't doing just fabric first. We're doing fabric and heat pump. So we're doing both in one go. We won't be giving people a lot of confusing choice and a lot of action drawn out over time. It'll be one touch, if you like. There'll be choice for people within parameters. It's going to be very long term. It's going to be controlled by regulatory requirements that are coming through, like the heat code, the right to switch suppliers, and so on. We're thinking it will probably be licensed and then eventually socially franchised. They're all things we're working on. Lastly, who are we? We're an ecosystem of lots of different organisations funded through various innovation schemes. Been working on this since the project catalysed in 2021. So that's where we're up to. That's the nutshell. So back to you, Andy. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Thanks for that overview of what we're doing. Really good to hear about the project and the kind of rationale behind what it is that we're looking to do and why it's so important as well. Not only looking to provide that route to decarbonisation for terraces, but making sure that people live in them aren't being left behind in the energy transition. But there's also the added benefits that the potential for flexibility with the smart system and everything that we're looking to put into the properties that would benefit the grid as well. I will now pass over to Natalie Whittam, who is our Net Zero Street Officer at Rosendale Borough Council, who are working alongside RVE on this project. So,
thank you, Andy. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Great to see so many of you here. As mentioned, I'm Natalie Whittam, Net Zero Street Officer. I'm going to talk a little bit about why the council wanted to be involved in this project and what our role is. So Rosendale Borough Council first declared a climate emergency in 2019, and shortly after this, we commissioned an assessment of our carbon footprint to help us identify areas for action. The assessment showed that 33% of our borough's emissions were from domestic buildings, and that just 0.6% of borough-wide emissions were from the council's own operations. The council has set a target of reaching net zero by 2030. We're one of the smallest councils in the country, and we can't do this alone. So we understand that in order to reach this target, it's incredibly important to work in partnership with local community groups, residents and businesses. As we know, stone-built terrace properties of the kind found across East Lancashire and many other parts of the country are difficult to retrofit and difficult to heat, with additional concerns around condensation and mould, particularly in areas where residents might struggle to heat their homes. Rosendale faces a huge challenge, with approximately 14,000 terrace properties, accounting for over 40% of our total housing stock, compared to 26% for England and Wales. There is also a bit of variation across the borough. In one ward, 58% of properties are terraced. We estimate that 97% of those terrace properties are reliant on gas as their main source of heating, and around half of those terrace homes, so roughly 7,000, are in the 30% most deprived bracket in the country, as measured by the indices of multiple deprivation. We want our residents to live in warm, comfortable homes with energy bills that they can afford, but we know that there are huge barriers to this in terms of affordability of upfront costs and understanding of how to access the best technology. This project not only lends itself towards our carbon reduction strategy, but we're confident that by testing and rolling out this approach to the wider borough and beyond, we'll be improving health and quality of life for a significant number of residents who would otherwise struggle to do so themselves. In addition, we want to see the economic benefits of the scheme retained in our borough, so we're placing strong emphasis on the procurement element of the project and ensuring that we have the right green skills and experience in our local area so that residents who live and work in Rossendale can benefit economically. It's very local, and we have the support of the council's management team and local councillors to deliver. We strongly support the work the Rossendale Valley Energy are doing through the Local Energy Advice Demonstrator programme, and we're confident that the Net Zero Terrace Streets project has brought together a fantastic combination of technical skill and access to the local community that's essential to making this project a success. Next slide, please. Thank you. Our actions and outputs, we're working to support the project across several deliverables, but there are a few key areas in which we'll be delivering. Firstly, we're supporting Rossendale Valley Energy with supply chain and skills mapping, and we'll produce a research document which examines our current position in terms of green skills and what we'll need to do as a local authority, working with schools, colleges, employers to bridge any gaps. As I mentioned, we're keen to maximise the local benefits of the project by ensuring local people are skilled up to take on the jobs that will arise when the scheme rolls out to a larger area. Secondly, we're examining the various barriers and drivers in national and local policy that enable or hinder the Net Zero Terrace Streets scheme. We'll produce a set of policy recommendations that a local authority or national authorities will need to consider if they're looking to create a Net Zero Terrace Streets friendly environment in their area for the project to sit in. This includes working with planning, housing and economic development teams, amongst others, to consider how the project complements their strategies, and if it doesn't, look at how that could be accommodated. I think our most significant output will be a guide for local authorities who are considering taking on Net Zero Terrace Streets, either themselves or in partnership. It will be a comprehensive how-to guide, from initial assessments and understanding of your own area to how to negotiate planning permission, how and when to undertake community engagement, and so on. The idea is that we'll have tried and tested everything, so we'll be able to advise and guide other local authorities. We know local authorities are short on time and resource, so we're really keen to make the project as attractive and as easy to implement as possible, so authorities can pick it up and run with it, essentially. In addition, we are undertaking stakeholder engagement. As a trusted local voice, we're uniquely placed to reach out to residents, businesses and landlords, and we have begun reaching out to those groups. We've started and will continue to engage in particular with private landlords, as we know a large proportion of the types of properties we're looking at will be in the private rented sector. That can add a layer of complexity to the process in terms of consents, permission, arranging of appointments with tenants, things like that. So we'd really like to get landlords on board in shaping how they can engage with the project through the Fairer Warmth app, so that it appeals to as many people as possible. We're also eager to capitalise on the upcoming changes, the proposed changes to EPC regulations and minimum energy efficiency standards for private landlords, and that gives us an opportunity to support landlords in reaching their legislative requirements whilst also benefiting local residents. And finally, we're working to facilitate the work on the demonstrator properties, which Amaryllis will go into some detail about shortly, which are the non-traditional council-owned terraces. This work has involved liaising internally with planning, legal and housing, as well as with external agencies, including Lancashire County Council, as we're a two-tier authority area, and in our landlord capacity, energy suppliers for the properties too. We know from speaking with officers from other authorities that there's a great deal of interest in our project, so we do hope to continue building on that and establish confidence in the Net Zero Terrace Streets approach. As a very small local authority, we're well aware that we all face huge challenges in terms of finance and resources, and as climate change is not currently a statutory function, it often gets pushed to the bottom of the priority list, understandably. We're really looking at it from a number of different lenses and considering how decarbonising terraced homes isn't just a climate change issue, most definitely is, but it's also a people issue. And whilst we recognise the net zero benefits, we're also thinking about how this can benefit residents' health, well-being, financial stability, and also job opportunities too. So that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks, Andy.
That was a good overview of how the council's supporting us and being great. It is really good to work alongside a proactive local authority, however small they may be. They've been very supportive throughout the journey. So as Natalie alluded to, the council have been incredibly helpful with our 3 demonstrator properties that RVE are currently working on. Now I'll now pass you over to Amaryllis, who is our demonstrator lead, for an update and some reflections on the demonstrator properties.
Thank you, Andy. So yes, time is of the essence. We are currently facing a climate emergency, but also a cost of living crisis and an NHS crisis. So creating warmer, healthier homes can be part of the solution and can help with preventing winter deaths, preventing or alleviating respiratory diseases and fuel poverty. And we urgently need to find a solution for people who cannot afford the upfront cost of retrofits, or who are, for example, in a later stage of their life and won't be able to recoup the cost through savings on their fuel bill. A debt on the infrastructure appears to be a possible solution here. Timing is also of the essence. Funded projects are often restricted to the time frame of the funding, even though both heat loss testing and retrofits are seasonal. On the slides, you can see an ideal timeline. However, our funding started in March, which gave us very little time to plan, engage with property owners, engage with contractors, carry out research, and conduct heat loss tests and thermography. Luckily, Rossendale Borough Council is letting us use 3 of their properties for the demonstrator project. Our funding is ending next year in November, and so we will need to complete the retrofit before the end of this current heating season to be able to do some post-retrofit monitoring and evaluation. However, if you're lucky to get funding for 2 years, then a start in spring is perfect to include a lot of engagement work with householders, which is definitely needed. Also, some retrofits and maintenance work have seasonal restrictions, for example, external wall insulation, replacement of heating and hot water systems, which are not ideal to do in winter. So timing is key. And next slide, please. Thank you. More and more large-scale retrofit projects are using archetypal designs. And this means that one design is created for each archetype, which is then adjusted for each individual property, as of course, each property is different. In Rossendale, we have, as mentioned, stone terraces, and we've identified 4 main archetypes. Currently, in our demonstrator project, we have 2 mid-terraces in the same street, so we can evaluate an archetypal design here. They're basically the same property, but one has got an extension and the other one doesn't. And they are also quite different in terms of air permeability. And for our 3rd property, we have a back-to-back and terrace, of which we can use the design later on as an archetypal design for other similar properties. It would be great to create a database with archetypal designs. So if anyone is interested in that, please do get in touch. And for our design, we've subcontracted the architecture firm Buttress. We have included several assessment methods, and as such, a gold-plated assessment methodology is not scalable. We will evaluate these next year in terms of cost effectiveness, disruption to the householder, and also educational potential for householders and installers. For example, for the blower door test with thermography, we already received positive feedback from some tradespeople and householders that this helped them understand where exactly the drafts and accompanying heat losses are occurring and the importance of the right air tightness measures. Assessments we're using are EPC, RDSAP retrofit assessment, condensed heat loss tests, blower door tests combined with thermography, and also PHPP. I will also be looking at full SAP and other potential assessments. Then for the monitoring, we'll include temperature, humidity, pressure, carbon dioxide monitoring in every room, and particulates in the main living space. Also outdoor weather data, sensors to monitor the opening of windows and doors, and monitoring for the efficiency of the heat pump. And these will be installed by IoT Horizon based in Rossendale. We'll also do, sorry, that's still the previous slides. We'll also do a pre and post retrofit occupancy questionnaire and monitor fuel usage. And we're currently looking at British Standards 40101, but it's to be noted that it is currently under revision. And 2 of the homes will be occupied for minimum 5 years, and we will continue the monitoring in the 3 homes long-term beyond the timescale of this funded project. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, the next slide, yes. Most, if not all, of the current retrofit standards are fabric first. And don't get me wrong, I come from a fabric first background, and I fully appreciate that many people have worked very hard to bring retrofits up to the standard it is today. But unfortunately, a fabric first approach is for many people not affordable, and not everyone has access to grant funding. In these cases, we need to look at other options to create warmer, healthier homes and decarbonize the housing stock. For this reason, we are looking to create our own retrofit standards at the end of this project, as we are designing a shallow retrofit to accommodate a pre-sized heat pump, while including considerations for a future whole house retrofit into the design and complying with PAS 2035. And the next slide, please. Thank you. Then, how to create a large-scale, low-risk, high-quality retrofits for traditional terraced houses and ensure good quality assurance. As you can imagine, a lot of learning is coming out of this project, which is being recorded, so we can share this learning at a later date. In the meantime, some highlights are in terms of procurement. Most large-scale schemes work with contractors who are not what is called direct to consumer. And because we work with vulnerable households, it is important to us that contractors do have experience in working with and around vulnerable householders. However, direct-to-consumer contractors may be smaller scale and aren't always geared up for large-scale retrofits. So how can we increase and improve the supply chain without taking them away from the grant-funded schemes? Early engagement of contractors is key. For example, by the time we found a suitable borehole driller, we were in August, and their earliest availability is in January. We also need to be mindful, on the other hand, not to engage other contractors too early, for example, when the design is not yet finalized. Credit meters versus prepayment meters in terms of energy justice. We need to weigh up householders' budgeting needs and see if we can help them in another way if this is required, versus having access to cheaper tariffs with a credit meter. Also, with a prepayment meter, there is risk of non-heating, and research has shown that with a heat pump, there is potential higher cost when heating intermittently. And this also highlights the need for us to provide ongoing support from our friendly energy champions so that people are not left to deal with their new heating system alone. Other points of learning are sequence of work when working with several contractors, the borehole and heat pump journey, And there's also the complexities of planning applications, road closures, usage of hydrants for the drilling, for which a good relationship with your local authority can help. An example here is the importance of starting to have conversations with your local water company early on in the process, as they want to protect their assets and may otherwise object to any planning applications, even if you stay outside of the 3-meter buffer around sewers, for example. With terraced houses, it is likely that the boreholes need to be drilled near a sewer or water supply, and even though the drillers will dig the first meter by hand, it still makes water companies nervous, and furthermore, some sewers may be located at a depth of 1.2 meters. Again, it is helpful to have someone from your local authority joining these conversations and showing support. And luckily, we do have a good relationship with Rossendale Borough Council. Back over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Amaryllis. Thanks for the update on those properties. There's a lot of work going into these 3 properties to, like Amaryllis said, gold plated, not necessarily just with the standard, but with everything that we're going on with, so that we can work through as much as we can, so that we can, everything that's flagged up, we're working through. Moving on, let's have a look at some of the aspects of the project that's going on now. So I'll pass you back to Louise for a quick overview of the work that's in progress in 2 key areas: the customer journey and the techno-economic and financial modelling. Thank you, Louise.
Thanks, Andy. Oh, it's telling me to unmute myself, but I think I'm unmuted. Shout if you can't hear me. Yeah, thanks, I see a thumbs up. So there's too much to tell you about, especially as we lost a bit of time. There's a lot of different elements to this work that we're doing, because we're doing the demonstrators, but we're building the service blueprint, techno-economic model and financial model, and then a load of work around governance, which I can't cover today: legals, supply chain work and procurement. And then we're also working in Wales with Bridgend. So we're trying to get everything lined up, so that if we get loads done, that we're able to roll it out. So there's a lot more to tell you. But critically, we're working on the macro level and the micro kind of nitty-gritty level, and each bit feeds into the other bit. So every time we learn something new, it has implications for the techno-economic model. It has implications for the customer journey, or for how we work with people. It has implications for legals. So it's all really integrated, like this giant nightmarish jigsaw. But ultimately, we want to support this pipeline of projects that we can aggregate. We want to develop and, in a way, prove this methodology, producing a handbook, perhaps some new standards, to form quite a uniform process that people can trust in. And we want to deliver it as a non-profit extractive model, so that it's based on recycling any savings back to the community, with the communities at heart. So I'll just zoom you very quickly into the techno-economic model. Oh no, hang on, I won't. I'll talk to you first about the customer journey. So yeah, we've got the usual customer journey and service blueprint, which many of you might well be familiar with. So these have been built up for various services that have been rolled out, particularly around retrofit. That's taking people through the whole journey, and whether that's the customer, who could be an owner-occupier, a landlord, a tenant, a shop, someone in a flat, and the different actors, all the different organisations that we need to get this delivered. And it includes some physical and digital transactions and interactions. Through this, we're sort of categorising this journey so that we can see all of our data protection implications, all the compliance stuff, what we've got to procure, what the key performance indicators for procurement and type of contract and insurance and liabilities are. So that builds us a digital governance framework, as well as organisational and operational frameworks, feeding through into our work with lawyers around risk management, contracts, procurement. And then we'll have different journeys for different kinds of customer. So that's work in progress. we're really looking at active inclusion in this, not just minimal compliance. So it's got to be fully inclusive so that we are not leaving anybody out, somebody who doesn't want to be in when a contractor comes around, or someone who needs a very high level of information and control. So that's at the heart of what we're doing. We're not doing it for your bog standard persona. We're really looking at folding in the most people in most need and most need of handholding into the way we design the service. And I've got a big bee in my bonnet about that, because I know people who have missed out time and again on government schemes because they're seen as difficult or they're vulnerable. So that's a big chunk of work. There'll be more coming through on that we can share perhaps in the new year, as long as I get my act together. Moving on to the techno-economic and financial models. I'm super suspicious of nice diagrams like this, seen a lot of them, of all the theoretical ways that we can make this thing investable. So Borough Happold have initially developed a techno-economic model which pulls through all the capital costs and startup costs of that heat system, the retrofits, the PV, the engagement costs. So it's not just theoretical, we're getting right into this and looking at the real costs. We're developing that and putting in different scenarios so that we're doing things like, can we protect the standing charge against a sudden rise of inflation, so we could cap it, so it couldn't go up more than, say, 2% a year. So we're asking lots of difficult questions and getting people to program that into their spreadsheets. We're working with Abundance, not on a bond. It's not the bond thing. We're working with them on a financial model which they're building that gives us the cash flows and the investor views. And we're also working with the UK Infrastructure Bank as well, who've done a workshop already with us. We've got another one coming. So we are still working on that project phasing and financial modelling. So I can't give you exact return estimates, but the model is looking at coming up with something that's suitable for long-term project finance investment, and then probably a refinance for the long-term, much lower cost patient investors. We're looking at how we get these economies of scale without dropping on quality. At the moment, the figures are suggesting that we will be able to move forward to that. So at the moment, we're funding we're looking at how we fine-tune funding the development of the projects locally at the local delivery vehicle level, how much grant support we will need, because we will need grant support initially, and then so that'll be funded first by grants for pilots. Then we'll move into some supported projects but funded by investors with green or social agendas. We start to de-risk it over the next few years, and then we mix in this longer term patient capital. And that's similar to what the broadband rollout looked like. So we've got models of people we learn from and what we can follow. Then we'll need to bring in funding for the National Community Interest Company that we'll be setting up, have set up actually, whose function will be to develop the pipeline and hold that intellectual property and support rollout. And next priority is really to get funding for a 10 to 100 home pilot to run those figures at a larger scale. In terms of the financial model, we want to aim for a grant-free, non-FAFI, non-eligibility model. Wouldn't it be lovely? But we're not going to get there quickly. So firstly, fully grant funded, then a bigger pilot grant funded with some investment. Then we'll be trying to persuade the government, and they seem interested in this, in how we could have a level of subsidy. And by the end of this, by November, we'll know how much subsidy would be needed to make this thing fly and be investable. So we'll have a blend. And we could taper that subsidy. So could you aggregate boiler upgrade scheme? Could you aggregate something that's around areas of deprivation to say, this is a voucher for or a social tariff for this area? We'll taper it as it rolls along. Then we continue to get reduced costs. We get money in from flexibility, and then we get to non-grant dependent. That's the theory, and that's what we're clearly aiming for, because we can't just keep spending more and more money on this as a government. There's just not enough money to do all the houses that we've got. So that is the aim. It sounds very nice in theory, but we're really investigating all the risks, the risk of non-payment, as somebody has put in one of the questions, where we get those funds from. We're starting to talk to investors. So yeah, I mean, we mean business. We don't want just a pretty another pilot, because we've had too many of them. We've got jobs to do, so to get this done. So that's my bit. Over back to you, Andy. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. That was really good, and I think you've answered quite a lot of the questions that were in the chat. So we'll move on to we want to still finish at 2, so that we're not keeping anybody any later than we first intended. So first of all, the one at the top is something that I did think would pop up, which is when going street by street with landlords and tenants, what is the approach to persuading the landlord to act now rather than waiting to be told to do it, given that they don't directly benefit from low carbon heating? So this is something that Lauren, who also works for the council with Natalie, she's on leave currently, has done a big piece on landlord engagement. Louise, you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I mean, landlords, of course, there'll be many landlords are dragged kicking and screaming. Sorry, landlords, to be compliant. We've got lots of experience with licensing schemes, and in fact, Lauren used to run the licensing scheme for landlords in Burnley, so she comes to the council with a lot of landlord experience. Landlords we've spoken to already are quite keen on having a fully managed service where they can have it happen to their house, and then they become compliant with more standards coming in. Their house is also kept warmer, and so it's less at risk of damp. There are lots of they've got quite rightly lots of questions about the technical stuff, but we've started engaging with landlords, and we will be doing more of that. But the signs are good already, actually. So it'll be one that we keep cracking on with. There is a risk. Do they put the rent up? There is a risk around data, that how much can the landlord see of my energy use, because that's private. So we're going to be doing some quite strong walls between what the householder who's living in the house tells us and shares, and what the landlord sees, and then maybe how we manage a portfolio of homes that belong to one landlord. But yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised by what we've heard back from landlords already.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, it has been quite positive. Apologies, somebody's dragging some bins behind me if you can hear them. I think we've got time for possibly one more, and I'll pick up on something that Dr. Donald Brown from the Ashton Climate Solutions was put in about the phasing of the work, and trying to do all the homes in one go, or we gradually with solar and monitoring first. I think part of this has been picked up already, that we would be going street by street, and we'll be picking up kind of where we are. And the clusters that we've talked about would be kind of at a substation level, and we'll be working with the DNO to kind of work through that, so that we're not essentially putting all this kit in and blowing up substations with the increased amount of electricity that we're putting on. But yes, as Amaryllis touched on, the monitoring will continue throughout the properties, be that the 3 individual ones that we're doing at the moment, and then as it scales up, we'll continue to monitor those properties, so that we know kind of what's going in, and you know, we will tweak it here and there if there's something that comes through, and we will continue to innovate as we go through the projects. If new materials come up, or if there's new ways of doing things, if there's new miraculous heat pumps that come out, we'll keep working to put these in and help ultimately help the people that live in these terraces. Sorry, I've kind of taken that one on, but we don't want to keep you for too long. I know we're quite conscious of the time, and there were a lot of questions in there. As we said at the beginning, we will have a look at them, and we will attempt to answer the majority of them and stick them in a kind of a progress report that we'll send out alongside the slides and the recording of this webinar. Please sign up to the newsletter that is on your screen now. Obviously, you can't click the screen, but when you get the slides, please follow the link, and it'll take you through, keep you up to date with what's going on. and it'll give you an opportunity to keep in touch with us as well to see where we're going. There will be 2 deeper dives into kind of where we're going in February. One targeted more at local authorities, that's on the 13th of February, and another one that's targeted more towards community organisations, which will be the 27th of February. As it just goes without saying, I guess we're a couple of minutes early, but thank you very much for coming, and again, apologies for the issues at the beginning with the passcode. We all got there eventually. And a big thank you to our funders in Innovate UK and to the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero for helping and supporting through the project so far. And I think that's pretty much everything.